My fiancée stole our entire wedding fund while I worked overtime to build it. We saved for 18 months. She burned through $14,000 in 8 weeks and left $1,980 behind. Then she looked me in the eye and asked if I was ending this over money. I slid the folder across the table and let her see what she had really ended. I've been a licensed electrician since I was 22. I'm not the kind of person who makes fast decisions or big gestures. I trace problems, I document them, I fix what I can fix. That's how I work. That's how I live. Sloan used to say it was one of the things she loved about me that I was steady. Turned out steady was only attractive until it stood in the way of something she'd already decided to do. We'd been together 3 years when I proposed. Engaged 11 months when everything fell apart. Sloan worked in marketing at a mid-size firm, good income, though her numbers had always been a little less predictable than mine. That never bothered me. I figured we balanced each other out. Megan had been in Sloan's life since college. I liked her fine at the start. She was always running something, a dropshipping venture, a wellness blog, a pop-up shop that lasted one weekend. None of it stuck. But Megan had conviction, and Sloan had always matched it. There was a period, maybe a year before we got engaged, where Sloan had seriously floated the idea of co-signing a small business loan for Megan. I talked her out of it. I thought that was the end of it. Sloan always said Megan just needed one real shot to make it. I should have paid more attention to how she said that. The wedding fund was my idea, and Sloan loved it the moment I suggested it. We opened a joint account 18 months before the wedding date. $200 each. Every month mine usually came from overtime. The rules were simple, and we both said them out loud more than once. Nothing comes out without a conversation. Not for an emergency, not for a deal, not for anything. We talk first. By the time this story starts, the balance sat at $14,200. 18 months of discipline. 18 months of the same assumption. We were building something together, and we both knew the rules. She moved it all in 8 weeks. It started on a Tuesday evening. I logged into the bank app to check whether a direct deposit had cleared, something I do every 2 weeks without thinking about it. I tapped over to the joint account. The balance on the screen said $1,980. I refreshed. Same number. I checked the account number to make sure I was in the right place. I was. I scrolled up to the transaction history and started reading. The withdrawals went back 2 months. ATM cash pulls, transfers out to an account I didn't recognize. The amounts changed every time: 800, 600, 1200, 500. I counted them as I scrolled. 13. 13 separate withdrawals. All of them hers. I put the phone face down on the counter. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I made dinner, and I waited. She came home around 7. I kept it simple, no accusation, no edge in my voice. Just a question. Hey, I was checking the account. Did you move some money around? She was still taking off her jacket. She didn't stop. Didn't look up. Yeah, I moved some around for vendor deposits. We'll sort it out this weekend. No amount. No vendor names. She set her bag down and asked what I was cooking. I told her. She went to change clothes. I stood at the stove and did the math in my head. $14,200 in the account 2 months ago. $1,980 now. She had called $12,000 in missing wedding money vendor deposits and then walked out of the room. I nodded at the pan. I didn't say anything else that night. I didn't sleep well that night. Not because I was upset, or not only because of that. I kept running the number. $12,000 doesn't disappear into vendor deposits. Vendor deposits for what? We hadn't booked a caterer. We hadn't signed a venue. We hadn't committed to anything that required a single deposit, let alone 12. The next morning I went back to the transaction history with a notepad. I wrote down every withdrawal in order. Date, amount, type. $800, 600, 1200, 500, 1000, 800 again. I kept going. 1500, 600, 800, then 1200, 900, 1200, 1100. 13 transactions. $14,000 even. Not $13,980, not $14,250, $14,000 exactly, like someone had been keeping a running total and stopped the moment they hit the number they needed. That's what got me. The amounts were different every time, varying just enough to look like routine activity to anyone who wasn't paying close attention. And after the first 2 weeks, never more than one withdrawal in the same 7-day window. She had paced herself. She had been deliberate about it. This wasn't a panicked decision made on a bad afternoon. This was 8 weeks of the same decision, made over and over and over again. She hadn't slipped up once. That made it worse than anything else I could have told myself about the situation. I sat with that for a few minutes. Then I started thinking about Megan. The first withdrawal landed almost exactly the same week Sloan had mentioned, in passing, that Megan was signing a lease on a commercial space, a retail boutique, home goods, local artisans, something like that. I'd half listened. Megan always had something going. I hadn't asked for details. Now I looked it up. The business had a social media page, bright photos, a clean logo, posts about community and quality. I scrolled to the bottom and worked my way up. 47 posts total. The last one was 6 weeks old. Before that, they had been posting every few days without fail. Then nothing. No closing announcement, no, we'll be back, no explanation at all. The page had just stopped, mid-sentence, the way a phone goes dead mid-call. 6 weeks ago. Right around the time the withdrawals had slowed down and then stopped entirely. I set the phone on the table. I already knew what I was going to find next. I just needed to go find it. The next evening I found what I was looking for. I searched the commercial real estate listings for the neighborhood Sloan had mentioned, the area where Megan's boutique was supposed to be. It didn't take long. Suite 14B, 2,200 square feet, available immediately. The listing had gone live 3 weeks prior. The description read, recently vacated, move, in ready. There was a contact number for the leasing agent and a photo of an empty storefront with bare white walls and a concrete floor. 3 weeks ago, that space was already back on the market. The business hadn't stalled, it was over, and the money that had gone with it wasn't sitting in an account somewhere waiting to be sorted out. It had paid for a lease on a space that was now listed for the next tenant. I pulled up Megan's business page. It had gone private since I last checked. The website was still up, but the phone number on the contact page was disconnected. I tried it twice to be sure. Suite 14B, available immediately. The money had already followed it out the door. I closed the laptop. There was no version of this where the money came back on its own. That window had closed while I was still going to work every morning, assuming we were on track. I sat with that for a moment. Then I heard Sloane's key in the lock. She came in, set her bag down, and we ate dinner like any other night. Halfway through the meal, she picked up her phone and started scrolling. A few minutes later, she slid it across the table toward me. I found a reception venue I really like. What do you think? I looked at the screen. A banquet hall with high ceilings, good lighting, capacity for 150 guests. The deposit to hold the date, $2,400. We could pull from the fund for that, she said. I looked at the photo for a moment. Then I looked at her. She was eating, relaxed, waiting for my reaction the way you wait for someone who's about to agree with you. Sure, I said. Let me check the balance later. She nodded and took the phone back. She had just suggested pulling $2,400 from an account with $1,980 in it. Either she had genuinely stopped tracking what she'd done, or she was performing normalcy so completely she'd lost the thread entirely. I couldn't decide which one said more about where we actually were. I already had the folder started. That night I added 2 more pages. I gave it 2 more days before I built the file. I needed to be sure I wasn't missing anything. I needed to be sure that when I sat down across from her, there was nothing she could point to and call an error. So I waited. I watched. And on a Thursday evening while Sloan was at the gym, I spread everything out on the kitchen table and got to work. I logged into the bank portal and printed every transaction individually, 1 withdrawal per page, date stamped, amount in the top right corner. 13 pages. I went through them with a yellow highlighter, amount and date on each one, then stacked them in order from the first withdrawal to the last. I printed the Suite 14B listing, the photo of the empty storefront, the words recently vacated in the description, the date it went back on the market. I printed a screenshot of Megan's business social media page taken before it went private, 47 posts, the last one 6 weeks old, the silence after it louder than anything she could have written. I put everything inside a plain manila folder. I wrote nothing on the outside. 13 pages. 1 folder. I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready. 2 nights later, I was in the kitchen when Sloane's phone lit up on the counter. She'd left it there while she was in the other room. I wasn't going through her phone. I want to be clear about that. The screen just lit up with a message preview, and the name at the top was Megan's. I read the preview. Then I picked it up. The message was long. Megan opened with something close to an apology. The business hadn't worked out the way they'd hoped. The timing had been difficult. The lease situation had been unfortunate. Then, without pausing, she moved straight into a pitch. She had a new concept. Better timing, better location, clearer vision. She knew Sloan had always believed in her more than anyone. She was hoping they could talk soon. No mention of the money. Not a figure, not a timeline, not even an acknowledgement that any had changed hands. It read like a friend asking for a fresh start, not like someone who had just watched $14,000 of someone else's wedding fund close with her lease. The timestamp said 9 days ago. Sloan hadn't replied. I set the phone back exactly where it had been. Then I went and added a screenshot to the folder. No mention of paying it back. Not a single word. The last piece came the following evening. We were in the living room, and I kept it simple. A question dropped into a quiet moment, no edge in my voice. Hey, I've been thinking about the deposit timeline. Roughly how much do we have in the fund right now? Sloan didn't look up from her laptop. Around 12,000, I think. Why? Just working through timing. No rush. She nodded and went back to her screen. She had said it without hesitating. Without a pause, without a tell, without anything that looked like the effort it should have taken to say a number that was off by $10,000. $1,980. That was the actual balance. She had told me 12,000. I closed the folder. It was time. I sat at the kitchen table that night and I did what I always do when something breaks. I assessed the damage. I figured out what it would actually cost to fix it. The wedding was 8 months out. The account had $1,980 in it. The wedding we had planned, venue, catering, everything we'd agreed on came to roughly $22,000. That meant we were $14,000 short with 8 months to close the gap. To get back on schedule, I'd need to put in an extra $800 a month on top of my regular contribution. $800 a month, every month, no missed payments, starting immediately. That was the math if everything else stayed the same. But everything else didn't stay the same, because the person I'd be doing that with was the same person who had moved $14,000 out of the account without a word. The same person who had said $12,000 when I asked a simple question. The same person who had slid a venue listing across the dinner table and suggested we pull from a fund she had already emptied, without so much as a change in her expression. I thought about what staying quiet would mean in practice. It would mean absorbing this, treating the vendor deposits line as sufficient explanation, and spending the next 8 months writing larger checks into an account I no longer trusted. It would mean standing in front of everyone we knew at a wedding I'd helped fund twice, having never said a single word about any of this. It would mean the remaining $1,980 was also at risk, because nothing about the situation had changed, and I had no reason to believe it would on its own. Silence isn't neutral. Silence is a decision, and if I stayed quiet, I was betting $800 a month on a person who had already shown me exactly who she was when she thought I wasn't paying attention. I couldn't make that bet. I went to the bedroom and opened the nightstand drawer. The ring box was where it had been since the night I proposed, back left corner, behind a charger and a paperback I'd never gotten around to finishing. I'd spent 4 months saving for it. I picked it up, turned it over once, and carried it to the kitchen table. I set it on top of the folder. Then I thought about it and put it inside instead, tucked between the last transaction page and the back cover. I didn't want to lead with it. The paper needed to speak first. I put the ring in the folder. That was the last decision I had to make. She came home the next evening at the usual time. I was already at the table. She came home at the usual time. I heard her key in the lock, heard her set her bag down in the hallway. Then she came around the corner into the kitchen and stopped. I was sitting at the table. No food, no laptop, no phone. Just the folder in front of me and a glass of water to my right. I'd been sitting there for 20 minutes. She looked at the folder. She looked at me. "What's this?" "Sit down," I said. "I want to show you something." She sat. She was still half smiling, the way you do when you're not sure if something is serious yet. That didn't last long. I opened the folder. I did not hand it to her. I read from it. I said the date of the first withdrawal, the amount. Then I turned the page and said the date of the second, the amount. I kept my voice level. I kept the same pace for every page. By the time I reached the 5th transaction, she had stopped looking at the pages and was looking at me instead. I kept going. 6th, 7th, 8th. I turned each page and set it face down to the left when I finished with it, building a second stack as I went. When I reached the 13th page, I set it with the others, lined up the edges, and said, "That's $14,000. Exactly. She opened her mouth. I was going to tell you I've been meaning to. I slid Megan's text message across the table. She read it. I gave her a moment. Then I slid the Suite 14B listing across. The empty storefront. Recently vacated. The date it went back on the market. She stared at the listing. Then she pushed back slightly from the table and her voice shifted faster now, a little higher. "I knew you'd say no. That's the whole reason. I knew you'd turn it into a whole production and find every reason not to. And Megan needed real help this time, and I couldn't just do nothing. You knew I'd say no," I said. "So you didn't ask." She looked at me. "That's the whole point," I said. She said I was being unfair. She said she'd been trying to protect the friendship. She said if I would just listen for 1 second. "You made 13 separate transactions over 8 weeks. You weren't making a decision in a difficult moment. You were making a decision every time. Every time you opened the app, entered the amount, and hit confirm. 13 times. That's not a mistake." She said she'd pay it back. She said she loved me. She said I was making her feel like a criminal when she'd only been trying to help someone she cared about, and if I would just calm down we could figure this out the way couples were supposed to. I reached into the folder. I set the ring box on the table between us. She looked at it. The half-smile was long gone. When her eyes came back up to mine, they were different. "You're ending this over money," she said. "I'm ending this," I said, "because you made 13 separate decisions to lie to me. The money is just what those decisions looked like." She said I was overreacting. The ring box was already on the table. I stood up. I told her she could stay the night, I'd take the couch. In the morning, we'd figure out the practical side of things. I picked up the folder, tucked it under my arm, and walked out of the kitchen. She didn't follow me. The next few weeks were quiet in the way things get quiet after a decision like that. Not peaceful exactly, but settled. The noise was gone. Sloan moved out within the week. We didn't fight about it. There wasn't much left to fight about. She told her version of events to a few people in our circle, a softer version, from what I gathered. What she hadn't counted on was telling her sister Kara. Kara asked follow-up questions, and somewhere in that process the actual number came out, $14,000. Once Kara had that figure, the conversation went somewhere Sloan hadn't planned for. Megan's text made its way around eventually. Not through me. But these things find their way. The people who had known about the wedding fund, who had heard about the plans, read that message and went quiet in the particular way people do when they've seen enough and decided to keep it to themselves. Nobody called Sloan a villain. They just stopped calling with the same frequency. Kara reached out about 2 weeks after everything settled. She didn't try to defend anyone. She just said she was sorry and that she hoped I was okay. That was the right amount. I closed the joint account the same week Sloan left. I opened a new one, just mine, and on the 1st of the following month I put in $200. Same habit, different account. No specific plan for it yet. I was fine with that. I returned the ring to the jeweler. Got $1,950 back. A little less than I'd paid. That's how it goes. I slept better in those 3 weeks than I had in the last 3 months of the relationship. That told me most of what I needed to know. She said she knew I'd say no. She was right. I just finally got to say it.